Good morning. It's a wonderful Tuesday, and this is, of course, our Tuesday tune-up. I once found myself in a Lutheran church in California, listening to a very engaging preacher. He was telling his congregation how he had been away the previous week doing research on their behalf. It seems that he had chosen as his subject the concept of utopia, the perfect place. And so to aid in his research, he chose to search for utopia by traveling to one of those all-inclusive resorts in the Caribbean. He went to great lengths to let the folks know that he didn't really want to do it, but he agreed to suffer on their behalf for the sake, of course, of research. Oh, the things that we preachers do for our congregations. But there really was a point to it. While he did in fact have a very nice time, he quickly realized that he hadn't found utopia. The food and the drink was plentiful, but he found that the food was good, but not great. And the drinks, well, they were a bit on the watered down side. The location was lovely, but the facility was a little tired and in need of some maintenance. And while the service was great, he realized that other folks were working to serve him while he was playing. I mean, doing research. It would seem then that on his quest to find utopia, he had struck out. It left him with the impression that there is no perfect place on earth, and it's only in heaven that we will find true peace and tranquility. I have to tell you, I was torn this morning between talking about the Pilgrim's landing at Plymouth Rock or talking about Matt Damon being left behind in the movie The Martian. Now, if that seems like an odd combination, bear with me. The Pilgrims were victims of religious persecution in England who traveled to the New World to establish a new home for themselves so they could be free to worship God as they chose. Matt Damon and his crewmates had traveled to Mars as part of an advance party of astronauts to scout the planet and learn what they could. Okay, Rick, you're saying, what do they both have in common? They were colonists. The Pilgrims intentionally and Matt Damon accidentally, but both found themselves as colonists in a strange land far from the world that they knew. In their book, Resident Aliens, Hauerwas and Willimon talk a lot about a colony. Modern-day theologians both. A colony, they say, is a beachhead, an outpost, an island of one culture in the middle of another. That's precisely what the Pilgrims became. They brought their culture to a strange land, a land that they were not from, and established an outpost of that culture in the midst of the new world all around. Now, Matt Damon, although he was accidentally left behind, well, he did much of the same. He established an outpost of Earth on the strange and unfamiliar land of Mars. So you're scratching your head saying, okay, that's mildly interesting, Rick, maybe, but why are you talking about this? Because, friends, like the Pilgrims, like Matt Damon, we too are colonists. We live our lives as disciples who strive to bring about the kingdom right here on earth. We are in that sense not really a part of the world, even though we live here. Hauerwas and Willimon talk about us as a colony. Here's what they say. In baptism, our citizenship is transferred from one dominion to another, and we become, in whatever culture we find ourselves, resident aliens. Resident aliens. I think that they're absolutely correct. For we know that what we see in this world is not the end unto itself. We are changed by our relationship with Jesus Christ, and we live our lives according to a different set of ideas. We're an outpost of Christian culture in the middle of a world that is not. And that really is the crux of the matter. What we're talking about right now is the idea of being in the world, but not of the world. As Christians, we indeed live in this world, but we're not of this world. That world ended when Jesus was born, when the Son of God took mortal form, lived among us, died, and then rose from the grave. As followers of Christ, we know that this world is not the end, but the beginning. We know that Jesus will come again and that we will be with God for eternity. But my friends, that is not just some far off day. It is happening right now. For we are living in the middle times. The old world passed away with the life and death of Jesus. And while we wait for the coming of the new Jerusalem, we remain in the world, but not of the world. Now, in case you're wondering, life as a resident alien is nothing new. The Jews who were kidnapped and taken to Babylon had a very similar experience. While they were under great pressure to adapt to their new surroundings and environment, they held fast to their culture, their beliefs, and their God. As we hear in Psalm 137, their lament was, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" Well, I'll tell you, that's precisely what Jesus is calling us to do. For Jesus tells us in John's Gospel, "I do not give to you as the world gives." The world, the old world, tells us that we should focus our efforts on ourselves. We hear about the wisdom of the world all the time, and it goes something like this. See if you've heard these before. Charity begins at home. Always look out for number one. And my personal favorite, of course, do unto others before they do unto you. Oh. These are the world's way of keeping us focused on ourselves rather than others. But Jesus refutes that and reminds us that we are not to live according to the so-called wisdom of the world, but of God. We are to sing the Lord's song to the world, even as we are merely resident aliens living in the world. We're to sing the Lord's song by acting counter to the wisdom of the world, by turning the other cheek, and by loving our enemies. When we do this, we share the gospel. We show others what life is like when we live in Christ, and we show the world that there is another way, a better way. For unlike other colonies living among aliens, we are called not to remain apart, but to share our love with others. Our mission is not to protect our private little culture and maintain it as an island set apart from the world. No, we are called to share the gospel with all, making disciples of all nations. That is the way that we can prepare for the coming of God, for the coming of the New Jerusalem when God will dwell among us. My friends, we are called to turn our colony into the kingdom. Something to ponder over the course of this week. God bless you. God love you.